Our, our black and brown and low-income neighborhoods have missed out on investment. And so we've got to make equity one of the criteria for how the proceeds are distributed and what projects get done first. And so that's a big part of it. And you can see from the map of some of the projects the city manager is recommending to us, and I think we're going to discuss this in council next week, that they go across the city. And then Scotty Johnson, who's the one council member who voted not to sell the railroad, he said because he wants to see some equity in place, and so he and I are working on an ordinance for that. But that's going to be, there's good news in that coming up too, so maybe in another meeting I can talk about that. And then, economic opportunity. Selling this railroad is going to create thousands of jobs, good paying jobs, union jobs. It's a chance for our struggling citizens to support themselves and their families. It's a chance for us to transform our neighborhoods, create jobs, and pass on to our children and grandchildren a really fantastic city. As we say, it's a once in a generation transformational opportunity for all of us that we just cannot miss, and we really need your support. Let me give you, that's the why. Let me give you a quick rundown on the what. You have the handout there that Ashley Hart passed out. The transformation of our cities, so all this started with the Southern Railroad, Cincinnati Southern Railway being built in 1880. It's a 337-mile railway from Cincinnati to Chattanooga. And Norfolk Southern began leasing it from us in 1881, so more than 140 years ago. In return, we now receive about 26 million, $26.5 million a year for the lease, and that money is what we use, part of what we use for repair, modernization, or replacement of our existing infrastructure. In 1987, the Cincinnati Southern Railway Board of Trustees entered into a 25-year lease with Norfolk Southern, continuing leasing it to Norfolk Southern, but this was a new 25-year lease. And part of that lease was that Norfolk Southern had the option of renewing for another 25 years, taking it up to the year 2051, which it did. And so Norfolk Southern has the exclusive right to use our railway until the year 2051. But meanwhile, with this 1987 lease, the terms are up for renewal, renegotiation. So naturally, as with most leases, we want more money and we need more money. So the Board of Trustees started negotiating with Norfolk Southern. 25 million, 26 million a year is just not enough. It's not meeting our needs. And so these negotiations didn't really go well. Norfolk Southern came up a little bit, not enough. We really didn't want to go to arbitration, and we started talking about selling. And so Norfolk Southern started at offering $865 million. We started at $2 billion, and we finally both landed at $1.6 billion, which is the current deal. We had 3 companies evaluate our asset, this railway, to let us know that $1.6 billion is a decent price. It's a good deal. So the other thing we had to do, we didn't want the proceeds to go to debt payment, so we had to amend the Ferguson Act. So all this is, legal, legislative stuff, but the state legislature did amend so that this money goes toward what the current lease money goes toward, and that's existing infrastructure to repair, to modernize, to replace existing infrastructure. So now it's up to the voters. It's up to you to approve the sale. Let me say a few quick words about how, because I've told you about the why, I told you about the what. Let me say a few words about how the $1.6 billion will be handled. You have a handout with you, but for those of you at home, it will be invested in a trust. The board has a request for proposals out now for expert financial advisors, advisors to manage the fund, because people have said, who's going to manage that money, who's going to invest it? So we don't know yet. That request for proposal is out now. But conservative estimates by financial experts report that our return on investment would allow the city to have more than that 26 million per year that we're getting now. Conservative estimates are like maybe 40 million to 70 million, and it will increase because part of that return from the investment, part of the interest, return on investment will go back into the principal. So we'll continue to grow the principal from 1.6 billion, and then the board at its discretion will decide how much to put in. I've heard they're thinking about maybe putting a third back in the principal, maybe giving, the other part, the 2/3 to the city. But the point is the principal should not be touched. It will continue to grow, and that's a real good thing for us. So our return on investment will also continue to grow. You might have some questions about what happens, how do you keep people from touching that principal? And there is state law around that. So if it ever gets below 75% of the principal, then there's no money that can come out of it until it's back to 100%. But the idea, so there is something in place so that it's not at risk. But the point is to never touch it, to keep growing it, and use return on investment to fund all these projects that I've been talking about. Just a few questions that I've been asked, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. One question is always, what if the city council wants to spend that 1.6 billion? We really can't do that, and at least it can't get below 75%, nor do we want to ever touch it. Because that's state law. Another question we get is if the Norfolk Southern derailed as it did in East Palestine, don't we want to keep ownership of it so that we can maintain control? I get that question a lot. And I want people to understand we don't have any control now. The railroad is regulated by the federal government. We just collect the lease money. We don't tell them what to do. We don't deal with operations. That's Norfolk Southern, going by the federal government. And then they said, what if Norfolk Southern derails on our 337-mile line? Could we be sued? As attorneys always say, you can always be sued. But let me just say, the lease that we have with Norfolk Southern makes us not liable. But you can always be sued. People can sue you whether they're going to win or not. And you do have to pay legal fees to actually get out of that suit. So that would be wasted money. So we're saying it's true we're not going to be liable for any mistakes that Norfolk Southern makes, but we don't want to have a court fight to prove that, right? And again, another question is, maybe somebody else would offer us a better price. We're getting 1.6 billion. Maybe we could do better with another buyer. Remember, Norfolk Southern has exclusive right to this railway until 2051. And so there aren't a lot of companies out there who would say, okay, we're going to pay even more for it now, although this other train has the right to it. They're not going to just give it up, right, because they really need it. So those are some main points, and I know after Kevin talks, we can all open it up and talk. But, the bottom line here, folks, is that this is a bold, once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform our city, to create jobs, good jobs, and economic opportunity, and to bring equity to our underserved neighborhoods and residents. And so I really encourage you to vote yes on the sale of the railroad. It is something that we can do for ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, for our city. Okay, so I'm going to mute. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
Quick question. Can you repeat that about Norfolk Southern having rights until 2051? 2051.
Yes. So the question here, I'm echoing now, but I'm about to mute, but I just want to answer that question. Right. So in 1987, we went into the 25-year lease that we're in now, but part of that lease is that, part of the deal is that Norfolk Southern had the right to extend that lease for another 25 years. And they did exercise their option to do that back in 2021. So this lease that would have expired in 2026, they have the right to continue using the railway until 2051. Yeah, that's right, until 2051.
I'll get into that a little bit.
Kevin wants to address it, but that is, 2051 is the year. So, okay. All right, so I'm going to mute and turn it over to Kevin.
Somebody unmute me.